In the first part of this series, we went over the idea of the Null Test, and we used it to compare audio played through USB versus Bluetooth versus AirPlay. How do they differ? Because mathematically, we can subtract these using some nice software called DeltaWave, and we took a look at it there. Today, we have up comparing two DACs, a little JCally JM6 Pro and a Modi. We're trying to see, can we actually use DeltaWave to isolate what the difference is between them and to actually be able to, well, potentially hear the differences between DACs or lack thereof. Let's see how that turns out. All right, so in the first one, I went over the Null Test. I went over the Carver challenge and all of this, where he took his amplifier and he got it to be able to sound just like these really, really high-end mono blocks that were almost 10 times the price. And he did it. It's a very clever challenge by doing and saying, all right, look, if he takes the audio, he plays the music going through his amp and also going through the reference amp. It says, okay, look, here's an audio waveform. It's me saying the word boo. And a waveform bounces up and down and up and down. You can do something like just invert the polarity of it and then say, hey, let me now combine these two channels. So by inverting the polarity, what we're really then doing is subtracting. We're subtracting the second one from the first one. And in this case, well, you get absolutely nothing. Well, yeah, it should be pretty darn obvious. You took something, you inverted it, you stuck them together, you got nothing. Okay, but that's if you're not making any change to the audio. What if we do something like we say, all right, here, we're going to take then that same original audio, we're going to take another one, we're going to invert it, and then we're going to go and add a little bit of a filter on here. So we're going to change the frequency response a little by having a little notch. Well, now, oh, wait a minute, of course, there's a difference. So what Carver had done is he then used his electrical engineering know-how and set an oscilloscope up and a rig so he could actually hear the difference between his amplifier and the other amplifier, and then be able to minimize that to get it so that it passed a test. And Stereophile had to say that, yeah, he passed the test. He made his amp sound just like those much more expensive ones. Okay, so, well, that was the 80s, and that was amplifiers. And so let's do this now digitally and do it with DACs. So I know I'm going to get another copyright flag as soon as I upload this, but I'm not monetized anyway. I don't care, and this is fair use. So here's the original, just to give you an idea as to what kind of level we should be talking about.
On the water as the sun plays on the...
Okay, so that may be you listening to some music, and, you know, we should be able to see something there, hear something there. All right, cool. Now then, let's take the two recordings of the JCally and subtract them from each other, and you get this. Yeah, there's nothing. Don't bother adjusting your volume. It doesn't matter. I'll do this for you in a little bit in any case, but yeah, you're not going to hear anything. Okay, let's take then the Modi and the JCally. Let's subtract them. Here is the big moment of truth, the incredible amount of difference that you can actually hear between these two. Ready? Yeah, I don't know about you. I'm not hearing a darn thing. Now, you may be saying, oh, look, it's the YouTube compression algorithm. Yeah, trust me, that's not happening on me here, and I can't hear a darn thing. So, but we can take this, we can boost it up a whole bunch. In the last video, I boosted by 15 dB. So let's boost by 40 dB, the difference between these two tracks. Let's try JCally to JCally again. Okay, there's hiss. There's little. Nothing. Oh. Okay. We get a little bit of something, but it is swamped out by the hiss. Well done. I mean, this is subtracting it from itself. Well, no, two recordings of it. You would expect it would sound the same as itself. So let's now boost up the difference between these two DACs by that same 40 dB. Okay. Bit. Okay, so you can get a little bit in there, but mind you, before we go on and I hit all of the methods and the details and everything for folks like me who love that thing, the sound of the hiss was really about the same as the sound as any difference. You would have these little tiny bits, presumably where there's a resync difference in the clock between them or something like that, but you're probably not hearing the hiss when you're listening to your recordings, right? And if you can't hear that hiss, you think though you can hear that little faint difference in the audio waveform and the music there? Because mind you, again, you're listening and the sound of the original music is about the same sound level as my voice, and this is the difference. So this, on top of the other thing, is actually what you would be thinking that you'd be hearing. All right, so you should be able to get from this that, yeah, you're not actually going to be able to hear the difference between these two DACs. All right, so now then let me just quickly go through the methods and everything for folks. Using DeltaWave by Paul K. The great thing about it is it's free, it matches levels, it corrects phase to 1,000th of a sample, it corrects clock drift, all sorts of great things, lets you visualize it, and lets you actually save the waveforms of the differences, and that's what you were listening to just a minute ago. I was using then a little bit of a track. This happens to be from Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull. I use this because back in that previous part 1, this was something where I could hear a difference in terms of what what Bluetooth was actually doing. Here, I recorded 2 audio samples on my Topping E2X2 in unbalanced mode using a Topping HSO2 isolator to take out hum and ground loop kind of noise. On the JCally, I gave it a 46 ohm resistor to act as a load because it's really expecting to be able to have a headphone on there, whereas the Modi just has an RCA output, and so we ran that straight. Using REW, I set it up so that we could see that the signal to noise, try to get that nice and clean on both of them. Certainly make sure we're not clipping, getting it so that the input level is the same coming in on both of these. It's about -2.5 dB full scale. So by the way, on this, what this is supposed to look like is a nice big peak here, and then very, very small peaks for the harmonics. It's the JCally on top, and it's the Modi on the bottom there. So in both of these, we're getting very nice, clear, high signal to noises. The Modi one here, I know, is like 106 dB or something like that. So when we actually go and take a look at what's the difference in the waveform between these, so it does all the lining up and does the subtraction. Well, when we take something like the Modi versus the Modi, this is what we get. The JCally versus the JCally, this is what we get. AKA pretty much nothing. Couple little pixels here and there. Now we're zoomed out and everything to be able to give you a little bit of a perspective as to what we should really be thinking about in terms of these delta waveforms. When we take a look at what's the spectrum, what's the frequency content of this difference here, you can see that both of these, there's nothing really remarkable going on this. We're seeing pretty much broadband noise. Simple noise is the difference between it, as you would expect. Of course, it's not going to be exactly the same. The audio playback hardware has got its noise. The recording hardware has its noise. You're always going to have some difference here, and that's what we're really seeing. This thing, the PK index, is supposed to get at the audibility of the delta. And so here, when we're looking at the Modi versus the Modi, or the JCally versus the JCally, very, very little. I mean, look, this is 97 dB down. This is 105 dB down. Yeah, the JCally's got a little bit more noise in it. Okay. There's a little hiss that I don't hear anyway. Okay, so now when we do then the main thing, the main event here of the DAC versus the DAC, the delta waveform, you can see a tiny bit there, buried way down. We zoom in and we blow it up a little bit, and this is what you're picking up. And so we can see there's a rhythmic sort of aspect to it, which is why I think that it's a little bit of reclocking given to drift, everything to get back on sync. DACs do this all the time, and it's a little bit of a pain for this kind of thing. But there's not a whole heck of a lot in there. 88 dB down. That's actually pretty freaking far down when it comes to masking and audio. Take a look at the spectrum. Not a whole heck of a lot. The one thing that you do see is up here near 20K. I'm wondering if, despite my attempts, that one of these may have been running at 48 and one at 44. Something's going on that's giving a little bit of a resync or a reclock that's driving that here. But again, this is pretty darn far down. And when we look at that PK metric, it's at 86 dB or so worth of difference. Okay, so there's then all of the data geeky bits for folks who really like that, like me. But in terms of the take-home, where are we? Remember that this null test is brutal. If there is any difference whatsoever, it's going to pick it up. We're doing our best to fix some of the standard artifacts like, the clock drift and that kind of thing. But just because it shows a difference doesn't mean that you can hear it. If it doesn't show a difference, of course, there's absolutely no way that you can hear it. And we can get an idea as to how big of an issue this is by looking at the graphs or even by listening. And remember, in that recording there, you were listening to the music at a perfectly normal sort of level. And when I hit play on the difference, it's utter silence. So that's an auditory readout of the perceptibility of that null. I can't hear anything. We crank the volume way the heck up and we're hearing a whole bunch of hiss and noise, plus a little bit of something. That's the difference. If you think that you're hearing a big difference between these two DACs in this case, that's what it's going to have to be coming from. And I don't know about you, but I couldn't hear it. And when you start thinking about some things like masking effects, your odds of being able to pick up that difference really are nil. So, okay, this is one little 20-second long segment on one piece of music on two modest price DACs. Clearly, we don't want to generalize to all of them, and there are going to be some differences out there. Absolutely, there's some that add some of their own coloration. But the great thing is, we can use this approach to try to understand what the differences are, measure them, and then see just how important they really are. How well can we actually hear them? And I'll see you next time.